I arranged a cruise, sweetheart, keep it under wraps. My wife flashed a smile and gave me a cheek kiss before running off to pack. She didn't suspect that I was also preparing for the trip secretly. At the terminal, I handed her an envelope that would alter everything. As I saw my wife in a hotel lobby in Sedona on a Tuesday morning, she was filled with laughter. Her hand was on another man's arm, a sight that had recurred often, yet this time it was unexpected. I wasn't meant to be there. The inspection of the bridge up north got rescheduled by a day without informing the non-field crew members. So before sunrise, I drove north, stopped at the contractor hotel for coffee, and walked into the lobby. It was then that I spotted her. I remained silent, observing from behind a column near the reception desk as she tilted her head the same way she used to for me. Then I exited the lobby and headed back to my truck. The journey home took 2 hours. Around mile 80, I dialed one number. Friend of mine, a lawyer previously represented, inquired about the same attorney later this week. Female voice responded asking for delay until Thursday, agreed to the suggested date. Upon return home around 7, Tessa kissed my scalp, inquired about dinner preference, responded with desire for steak. Wife poured wine and commenced cooking, observed her movements from kitchen island, seemingly undisturbed by recent events, smiled when she glanced my way. 7 years of matrimony passed between us, yet she remained unaware of my morning observation. Inside me, a clock began to tick, a countdown refusing to cease until silence myself. By following afternoon, I'd named the man too. Encountered him at city event prior year. Colin Miller, architect associated with one of our go-to firms for drawings, significantly younger than me, labeled as charming by those without daily exposure. Spouse was a pediatrician, remembered from same event. Only one in the room inquired about your occupation and paid attention to the response, Helen Miller. That was her name. On Thursday mornings, I spent an hour with the attorney opening a file and signing retainer papers upon departure. The following Friday at 6, I parked my vehicle opposite a pediatric clinic on Camelback. I waited. Helen emerged in scrubs and a thin gray cardigan. She was heading towards a silver SUV, keys already in hand. Before I could back out, I approached her. Mrs. Miller, I addressed her. She paused, examined me closely, much like how a doctor might scrutinize a stranger in a parking lot. I divulged my identity as Tessa Kavanaugh's spouse and informed her of the sighting of her husband and my wife at a hotel lobby in Sedona on that Tuesday morning. She remained composed, without any signs of shock typically portrayed in films. Instead, she simply gazed at me for a brief moment before whispering, "I've known for 2 weeks." We convened at a diner located just 2 blocks from her clinic. She consumed coffee but left it untouched. I opted for water instead. She disclosed information about her plans to me without any emotional drama or display. A doctor's wife had been mentally preparing herself over a 2-week period. She stumbled upon messages on her family iCloud account. The initial instance was accidental, a photo automatically uploaded, but subsequent events were deliberate. There were text conversations, hotel bookings, and a calendar entry marked with a specific color code. By the end of the 2nd week, she had collected screenshots of everything. Their upcoming travel plans involved a cruise to the Mexican Riviera, departing from San Diego in 3 weeks, lasting 7 nights. Tessa had informed me that she was attending a real estate conference in Denver. Colin had told Helen he had a site visit for a project in San Francisco. They had reserved cabins under both their first names. Their 11-year marriage concealed an entire secret week, paid for, packed, and coordinated around me as if I were mere furniture to be navigated around. Looking across the table at me, Helen asked what I intended to do. I responded, not revealing all details, but outlining the general course of action. There would be no dramatic outburst. Don't hurl your spouse out of a window. That day my wife was boarding a plane, making the cabin vacant without either of us. Helen placed her coffee aside. I offered help if she agreed. She granted permission. Our last encounter took place before the long journey commenced. It was a Sunday afternoon in a parking lot beside an unfamiliar coffee shop to both our spouses. We stood by our cars resolving matters. Helen had a separate cabin reserved, situated 2 decks beneath Tessa's sailing one. She contacted the cruise line that morning using her maiden name. She arranged the week off with her sister who was caring for the children. An empty envelope was prepared. I informed her about my ongoing project. The lawyer was handling the transfer of our joint account back to my premarital account. A friend of mine managed a moving company in Mesa. I had made a deposit for a Saturday job, arranging for packing everything from the master closet and home office. Drive it to Billings, Montana, deliver it to my mother-in-law's front door. A locksmith was scheduled for the same Saturday afternoon at 4. New deadbolts on the front and side doors, a key and a lockbox for me to collect upon return. Helen listened attentively throughout. She remained silent. Upon concluding, she nodded. You had given this much thought, I said. For the past 4 days, I hadn't pondered anything else, I explained. She nodded again. Afterward, I drove home and prepared dinner for my wife. For the subsequent 3 weeks, I was the best husband Tessa had experienced in years. On a Wednesday, I bought flowers without reason. On a Saturday, we visited her favorite spot in Old Town, the one with the mesquite grill and the small patio at the back. Her mother joined us during dinner. I asked questions. I listened. In the evening, she stood by the kitchen island reading her phone. I massaged her shoulders without speaking. She seemed to look at me differently, softer, slightly puzzled. I believe she thought I was afraid of losing her. She likely assumed she was avoiding detection, and I chose to remain oblivious. She remained unaware. Mornings were like different continents compared to evenings. Regularly, I traveled to work sites. En route, I made one call from the truck. Tuesday, it was the lawyer finalizing documents. Thursday, the moving company confirming the Montana route. Friday, the locksmith explaining deadbolt placements. Each instance lasted a brief while. No trace of these actions appeared on my face upon returning home. The agreement Helen and I maintained was straightforward. Nothing noticeable could be moved until suitcases graced the airport conveyor belt. If Tessa learned about it through word from a friend, a credit card alert, or an uneasy feeling at 3 a.m., the plan would crumble. So I smiled, cooked, and calculated the remaining days. 3 weeks transpired, followed by 2, then 1. The day before, I arrived home with a printout in hand and a smile on my face, finding Tessa pouring herself a glass of wine in the kitchen. I informed her I had a surprise waiting for her. Upcoming Denver conference had her working overtime, but I surprisingly planned a getaway. The itinerary lay on the counter: cruise, Mexican Riviera, departing San Diego same week as the conference. Her eyes scanned it. Upon seeing this, her expression faltered briefly before she managed a smile. I noticed the fleeting hesitation. Then came the smile. Sweetheart, she murmured. You didn't have to do that. I should have, I responded. The conference can manage without me. I long for 7 days with my wife where neither of us are reachable. She reassured me with words of understanding. She would reschedule, her boss would accommodate. She planted a kiss on my cheek and told me how thoughtful I was. That evening, she sat on the bed's edge, staring at her phone for a prolonged period. From my side, I observed her thumbs remain motionless as she contemplated telling him about our trip. She struggled to find the words, uncertain if she should. Ultimately, she couldn't. Following some time, she placed her phone down on the bedside table, switched off the light. Both remained awake. Despite our similar state, we had different purposes for lying there. On Friday morning, we journeyed to San Diego in the Silverado, traversing 6 hours through the desert. A coffee occupied her cup holder and another mine during this drive. The entire time, she discussed a listing in Paradise Valley, her sister, and a restaurant close to the port where she had arranged a table for our return night. She seemed overworked and unnatural in her conversation. I allowed it. One hand gripped the wheel, the other rested on my thigh. Beneath the radio, I calculated timestamps: a moving truck arriving at noon, locksmith at 4, Helen's flight from Phoenix at 1:15, Tessa's flight to Billings at 6:40. We arrived at the terminal at 1. I parked the car, wheeled my luggage towards the porters, stood by as they labeled them, 2 large ones for her, 1 small one for me. Her bags moved along the conveyor belt and vanished through the rubber flaps. She observed them depart. Inside, the structure was illuminated and bustling. We procured our boarding passes at a vending machine. She clutched hers tightly. I instructed her to wait near a pillar close to the front, mentioned I needed to retrieve something from the vehicle. The vehicle wasn't where I had gone. 2 days prior, I contacted the cruise line. The documentation was already at the porter's desk. I approached, signed, and asked the woman to retrieve one of our bags. She made a call. A short while later, the bag reappeared through the openings and moved towards the curb on a cart. Then I returned to where my spouse was standing, and we waited. I spotted Helen before Tessa did. She was traversing the terminal in a navy dress, sunglasses perched atop her hair, a document in her hand. She walked with purpose, neither hastily nor slowly. I stepped aside so Tessa could see Helen approaching. Tessa's countenance altered progressively. Initially, she seemed puzzled. Then she identified Helen. They had met once before, and it was apparent she was recalling the face. Then reality struck her. Her eyes widened and her mouth slightly gaped. She understood. Helen halted in front of us without smiling or glaring, merely extending the envelope towards us. I looked at my wife. Tessa, meet Helen Miller. Tessa was already aware of this fact. Tessa's hand hovered midair to accept the envelope but stopped. Helen placed it in her hand anyway. In a calm tone, I said, "There's a one-way ticket inside. You're flying from Phoenix to Billings at 6:40 tonight. Your mother is expecting you. The cabin on this ship now bears my name as well as Helen's. Your luggage is back at the curb. A moving truck waits at our house, destined for Montana by nightfall. The locks will be changed at 4. She attempted to speak but couldn't. Dean, she said, I'm traveling with a woman whom your boyfriend deceived. I replied, you're flying to see your mother, to explain why you no longer reside in my house. Then I picked up my carry-on and followed Helen towards the gangway, arm in arm. On the same Friday, we mutually agreed to cease deceiving each other. She attempted to speak from behind us. I detected her utter my name, Dean. I remained unfaltering, as did Helen. We simply continued walking. At the foot of the ramp, a staff member in white scanned our boarding passes, smiling and greeting us warmly, oblivious to what he was processing. The aroma assailed me upon entering. Salt, diesel, press, memories I'd amassed from my army days on ships. Helen approached me near the elevators. Thank you, she said. I responded that she didn't need to thank me. We were aiding one another, and this favor was also about honesty. She nodded once before proceeding to find her cabin downstairs. I ascended to locate mine. Just past 4, my newly activated phone vibrated. A number not saved in my contacts. I recognized the caller. Here's the peculiarity with phones. That very day, I'd set up a new line for myself. The outdated phone in my pocket was as good as useless to me. The call from Tessa's old number went unanswered. Instead, a voicemail played. I sat on the bed in the cabin, letting it echo through the room on speaker. It wasn't the familiar voice from our recent interactions, but one I hadn't heard for 11 years, young, scared, and filled with distress. I listened for 10 seconds before rising and stepping out onto the balcony. The ship was pulling away from the pier, the water below me swirling between it and the dock in a widening black line. With the old phone in hand, I leaned over the railing and let her voice continue. Apologies, names, promises, they filled the air for a moment before the wind carried most of them away. Finally, I released the phone, which fell silent as it met the water below. It made no sound upon impact, only the water took it in. For a while I stood there, taking deep breaths, releasing what I'd been carrying for too long, the weight of the past. The terminal grew smaller behind us. One San Diego's buildings morphed into a line of white silhouettes. Within them, a flight to Billings was preparing for boarding. A woman was stationed at a gate, ready to share a tale with her mother before the day ended. In a few hours, my brand new phone vibrated. A message from Helen. Colin had returned home to an empty house and a kitchen table note. She contacted everyone, firm partners, Helen's mother, old acquaintances, except for the one who had initiated the conversation. By dawn, the firm would be informed. By week's end, the partners would deliberate on their course of action regarding him. A man with a gentle jawline and an alluring visage was about to discover how small Phoenix could become when doors began shutting. I checked the message on my new phone, placed it in the nightstand drawer. The old one now rested at the bottom of San Diego Bay. I encountered Helen on the upper deck during sunset. We stood near, yet not too close, gazing over the water towards Baja as the sun set. The buildings of San Diego transformed into a series of white outlines. Somewhere within them, a flight to Billings was readying for boarding. A woman waited at a gate, planning to recount an experience to her mother before nightfall. In a few hours, my recently acquired phone buzzed, a text from Helen. Colin had come back to an empty house and a kitchen table message. She informed everyone, firm partners, Helen's family, old friends, except for the one who initiated the conversation. By dawn, the company would be filled in. By the end of the week, the partners would decide on their next steps regarding him. A man with a softer jaw and appealing features was about to realize how small Phoenix could feel as doors started closing. I read the message on my new phone, stowed it away in the nightstand drawer. The old one had found its resting place at the bottom of San Diego Bay. I found Helen on the upper deck at dusk. We stood near but not too close, admiring the sunset over the water towards Baja. The architectural landscape of San Diego changed into a string of white forms. Inside one of them, a flight to Billings was preparing for embarkation. A woman was positioned at a gate, intending to share a tale with her mother before the day ended. After a few hours, my new phone chirped. A message from Helen. Colin had arrived home to an empty house and a note on the kitchen table. He reached out to everyone, firm partners, Helen's relatives, old companions. Except for the one who started the conversation. By morning, the company would learn about it. By week's end, the partners would deliberate over their actions concerning him. A man with a soft jawline and an attractive visage was moments away from discovering how small Phoenix could become as doors began closing. I glanced at the message on my new phone, slid it into the drawer of the nightstand. The old one now rested at the bottom of San Diego Bay. I met Helen on the upper deck during sunset. We stood somewhat near, yet not too far away, gazing out over the water towards Baja as the sun sank below the horizon. For a while, neither of us spoke. I eventually uttered, "This isn't a relationship." She slowly nodded in response. We both understood the implications. Later, she confessed she wouldn't pretend it was when we returned and asked me not to either. We stood there for a moment longer. On Monday, she planned to file. My attorney had filed papers on Friday before we left. She released a nearly laughter-like breath. "Good men do exist," she said, reminding herself. I'd forgotten. I replied, "Good women too," admitting my forgetfulness as well. After dinner, I ascended the rail alone. All that remained was water and the boat's wake. 11 years of marriage is a long time to realize you weren't truly married in the end. Standing at the rail, I didn't feel like a man who'd won anything. I felt like a man who'd stopped losing. I voiced one thought aloud: home, peaceful, mine. Then I retired to my bed, occupying a room with a single name on the door. A vessel transporting me to destinations other than return. That was a year past. Tess remains in Billings. Her mother informed mine they no longer converse. Colin concluded his divorce with Helen during springtime, departing the company on his own and relocating to Tucson. The children fare well. Helen and I seldom engage beyond phone calls now. That summarizes the narrative. Thanks for the appreciation. Subscribe. More unexplored tales upcoming.